Hello, my name is Hally Herder. I'm a senior here at Vanguard. I'm a theology major with an emphasis in pastoral leadership. I am on the VU Rec team, so I'm involved with intramurals and Campus Cup. That's my current job this year. And this is my story. So I was raised in a Christian home. I'm from Colorado originally, Denver area. I'm the youngest of 4 kids, so I have 2 older sisters, and my brother is the oldest. And I had a great childhood, I would say. Loved being outside, playing with the neighborhood kids. And I went to a public school from 1st through 5th, and then a private school, 6th grade through 12th. And I would say a big part of my story starts in 6th grade. I started playing volleyball, basketball, and soccer. It's kind of where sports became a big part of my life. I was playing soccer before, but it's just little kids leagues and stuff like that. So 6th grade, started playing 3 sports. I got involved in theater as well. I transferred schools, so it was like that adjustment as well. But made new friends, began to adjust to that, and was pretty good at sports. I would say that's when my relationship with my dad became a point in my story that I could pinpoint and be like, oh yeah, that's where we really started bonding over sports. He was my volleyball coach in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I was friends with the same girls from 6th grade to my senior year of high school. And we played sports together all through those years. And I would say sports and like kind of friendships and relationships with guys became a pretty like big part of my life. Even though in 6th grade it's like, what are boys? But that's kind of the first time I can remember me liking a boy and a boy liking me. And as middle school began to develop, I continued pursuing sports, and like all of us, I think we struggle in middle school, but a big part of my identity was in sports. And as high school began, I also played volleyball, basketball, and soccer, was a varsity athlete in all 3 of those my freshman year. And I think a big part of that, a lot of pressure came from that, transitioning from middle school to high school and then going right into varsity sports. I feel like pressure like from my dad to perform, but in a loving way still. I think that relationship, like we bonded more over sports again. And kind of having this like, people knew that I was just a good athlete. And again, that was a way I took on my identity through performance, I would say. And I was also in student leadership and theater as well. So like I kind of became the girl who like did everything. And I liked being that person. I felt like that was giving me value and worth. And I would say like my freshman, sophomore year of high school, like I started getting in relationships with guys, and that was kind of another form of like the popularity, like, oh, I was like dating the popular guy, and like that again just like fueled probably my pride and like wanting to be known and like loved by the approval of others. And I would say throughout high school it just like escalated. My junior year was probably, it was like my best sports performance year, but the hardest year relationally for me. I was in a pretty unhealthy relationship that led into the sexual sin that I really struggled with throughout a lot of my story. And I just felt like consumed with performing for others, whether it was in sports or sexually, or my dad's approval of how much I could succeed in those things. And there kind of felt like this divide of like, okay, I know this isn't like what I find my worth in, but it was so consuming all the time that I was like, I don't really know where else like this would come from. I did have a relationship with God, but I would say it was more of the Sunday goer, if you will. And I was in a church that was, I would say, not very healthy. It seems like I was kind of living these two separate lives. I would like go to church and I would be unhappy with the way I was living during the week, and like repent and talk to my pastor of like, I don't want to live like this, but I didn't know how to not live that way. I didn't know how to not perform. I didn't know how to not find my worth in the value guys were giving me, or even the approval of my dad. I didn't know what the root of that was, and so I just continued in that cycle. And my church, I think, also stem, like a lot of things that I still am going through right now stem from some spiritual manipulation when I was at that church, that I think made me view spirituality as a certain thing. And again, it's still some things I'm working through today. So as the performance thing was really continuing to be fueled, I got to my senior year of high school and some things happened that it was kind of a wake-up call that I was like, I don't want to keep living like this. And I committed to a school in California. I Googled junior colleges closest to the ocean, and Orange Coast College came up, and I looked at their roster, and they were pretty good. So I reached out to the coach. He wanted to have me, so I committed to going there, moved to California, and I wanted to live differently than I did in high school. But again, I didn't know what the root issue of why I was making the decisions I was. I didn't know what that root issue was. So as I got to college, my first year, my high school was about 150 students and OCC was about 25,000. So there was a culture shock for me, for sure. And a bunch of the girls I was living with, they were smoking. They were pretty much throwing a party every night of the week. That was like the only social thing they did. And I was like, oh, this is college, yay. And I didn't really know what else to like do. And so I started going to the parties and I was like, oh, I'm not really gonna drink. Then I started drinking because again, it was what everyone else was doing. That's a very real thing. I don't even know if it was peer pressure. It was just like, okay, we'll try this. Because I didn't party in high school. So I was like, okay. And after about 3 months, I was like, every time I go to a party, I don't make good decisions. So I stopped doing that. And I started like reevaluating, like, okay, I went to this college to play volleyball. And that's pretty much it. I was in a relationship, still had very like toxic habits. And I was like, am I gonna choose like sports as my identity again and again? Like I did in middle school, I did in high school. Now I'm in college and I'm only at this school because I wanted to play volleyball. Like, is this how I want to live my life? And so I didn't go back to OCC. I was like, volleyball, I don't want you to be like my identity. And that was like, okay, so what are we gonna do? Because that was really my dream, honestly. Like, I really wanted to play college volleyball, like D2. And then I was like, I don't want to just make decisions based on volleyball, or performance, honestly. and the like affirmation that came with that. So I took a year off and I worked at Chick-fil-A for 2 weeks. And my best friend attended Youth with a Mission a year before me, and she called me and she was like, hey, how are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm taking a gap year, like don't really know what I'm doing, want to reevaluate things. And she was like, you should do Youth with Mission. And I was like, no. And she kept calling me and just like praying for me. She was like, maybe just think about it, like talk to your family about it. So I talked to some mentors, and I was like, okay, living in Hawaii with my best friend, like that's not a bad gig. So I decided to. So my whole plan to like stay home for a year was no longer my plan, and within like 3 days I bought my flight to Hawaii and was enrolled in Fire and Fragrance Youth with Mission. And looking back, like I did pray about it and I did ask like people that I valued and trusted, but the reason I made the decision of like living in Hawaii and being with my best friend, like that reasoning, like the Lord completely like changed my life through just like not even like, oh yes Lord, I'm following you. It was just like, sure, why not? And like even in my sure why not, like he used that to as like a avenue to transform my life, and honestly an opportunity that I would do all over again. So I attended Wham. I was in Hawaii for 3 months and then in Brazil for 3 months. And Jesus did use that organization to, like I said earlier, like go to the root issue of what my struggles were and why I was making the decisions I was. Of my identity was in performing. I didn't know who I was in Christ. I honestly would say I didn't even know like the characteristics of God. I hadn't known for myself. You know, when you grow up in a Christian home, you know of God and the things that he is, but to know that in your heart and to see how he's brought you to where you are because of his goodness and mercy, like that's a whole another lens to see God. And I feel like he transformed me and my identity, but he also revealed so much of who he is. And I would do it all over again. It was very hard. There were a lot of things that I left YWAM and I came to Vanguard. I wanted to go back to school after being at YWAM. Decided between 2 schools. The Lord was evidently, like, Vanguard was always like this bright, campus was always like lit up every time I imagined going to Vanguard. And I felt like my spirit was leading me there. But there were not a lot of things that I began to process until I came here. And how I like to explain it is like YWAM like broke me down, if you will, like, and like I said, got to those root issues, but I had so much more building up to do, kind of like the language of deconstructing your faith, and I am since then very much reconstructing it, and that's painful, and there's hurt there from both my experience in high school and at YWAM and a lot of moments in between, but every step of that has been redeeming, and I believe is part of the refining of my soul and my spirit, of learning more about myself and the Lord. So again, I have learned so much since being at Vanguard of spiritual disciplines and spiritual formation, and kind of the like boots on the ground, everyday life of our faith, rather than the spiritual highs or the experience, or the hype that I did experience at YWAM. And again, we need to hold both, the tension of both and asking the Lord for both. But right now I really feel like the consistency and the discipline is where the Lord is stretching my heart so much. So that's kind of my big picture story. And again, kind of reiterating that I am here because the Lord used my maybe sures that I don't feel like we're super like, oh man, I heard the Lord so strongly here. But how his hand was directing me in that. And I am so incredibly grateful for where I am today and the healing that's taken place, and the restoration between me and my relationship with my dad, where I've been able to be honest with him, and healing of the sexual sin and the consequences that's taken place, like still to this day, but again, the opportunity for growth in that, and an opportunity to look more like Christ in the forgiveness of that he's given to me, I can give to myself, and then I can extend to others. Still on that journey, and I know it's going to continue. I'm thankful for a place like Vanguard that has been safe, and accepting of that journey. And I know it's going to continue to go on, with his grace and mercy. So that's a little bit about my story. Thank you for listening.